So, oh boy, I'm tired today. New job is kicking my ass. But regardless of that, I'm here with this week's episode of Weekend Reading. Going to be changing things up a little differently because of my new situation. So the way this will work from now on is, this is the way I worked it out in my head. Film on Wednesday, edit and release on Thursday, so it's ready for Friday. I guess that's why. So yeah, I'll film it on Wednesday night, edit it, and hopefully release it on Thursday night, and it'll be ready by Friday morning. So it should be there by Friday morning if anybody actually wants to watch this. As to what this is, well, let's get into this week. Starting with what we had last week. My choices for last week were Family Tree, Volume 3, Forest, which was a pretty good read. I'm not going to lie. A nice ending to the overall series. Pretty decent series overall. King in Black, Return of the Valkyries, which was a nice little side story that was attached to King in Black about the Valkyries. It wasn't really the return of the Valkyries, didn't really return them. It made it sound like the Valkyries were coming back. It really wasn't. But an alright read. My pick of the week was this one, Future State, Justice League. And it's the one I went with. It was a decent read. The Future State stuff has been, I don't know, maybe my expectations for it were a little too high. But it hasn't been as good as I expected. But this one wasn't bad. It covered a lot of different things. Like most of these big collections do, they cover a lot of the different Future State books because they only released a few issues of each. I think it was only for like a month or two that they did this. So, we had a story about the Flash fighting a demon-possessed Wally West, further shitting on Wally West. I don't know why DC hates Wally West so much. There was a story about the current Aqualad, Jackson Hyde, now being Aquaman and training Aquaman, Arthur Curry's and Mira's daughter, Andy Curry, and her powers in this weird, alternate dimension thing. There were several stories about the Green Lanterns, about various Green Lanterns, and basically it all sums up to that at some point the Green Lantern the Green Lantern Central Power Battery gets destroyed. They don't quite say how. I'm sure they'll get into how somewhere down the line, but they haven't gotten into how, and so all the Green Lanterns lose their charge. And it's basically how they all the different lanterns deal with that in various different ways. The main story, of course, is about the Justice League. It's a new Justice League with all the various new Future State characters. It's Aquaman's and Mira's daughter, Andy, who calls herself Aquawoman. There's a Green Lantern. I don't know if this is supposed to take place before the Green Lantern power batteries lose their charge or what. I think she is some sort of detective. It's Superman's son, Jonathan Kent. Remember, this takes place 5 years in the future, and he's already kind of an adult, so he's like in his 20s now. It's the new Wonder Woman, who I think is actually getting her own TV show already. She's some South American chick with Wonder Woman-esque powers. There's the gender-neutral Flash, who actually had no involvement in the Future State Flash comic book, but they made such a big deal of promoting that the new Flash for the Justice League was gender neutral, and it's like it literally doesn't matter, so I don't even know why you would bother mentioning it, but whatever. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying it feels like it was just something they kind of threw out there to give a forced sense of diversity when it really doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form. So it's like, it felt like DC was just doing it so they give themselves a little pat on the back. You know, that kind of horse shit. That's what I'm angry at. I'm not angry at the actual diversity. I'm angry at the bullshit image of diversity that doesn't really exist. And the future state Batman, Jace Fox, who was in the star of the future state Batman trade that they released. It's an interesting story about their version of the Justice League, which is much different from former versions of the Justice League, and about them having to come together as a team. A plot by a future version of the Legion of Doom goes wrong, and they end up releasing the White Martians, and they even bring back the Hyper Clan, which, if you're younger than me, you have no idea who the fuck that is. But if you're my age and you started reading the Justice League around the same time I did, when they relaunched it with Grant Morrison writing way back in the fucking 90s, that is a blast from the past. So that was an interesting little shout out to a long time ago now. We're talking over 20 years ago now. So that was interesting. So it was a good story, and overall I liked it. Various good stories. I like the future state stuff. It's interesting stories, but I don't know, there's something about the presentation that seems a little off. But whatever. That was that. What are we going to be reading this weekend? So glad you asked. First up, we got Reign of X Volume 1. All that Dawn of X stuff has now been changed to Reign of X for some reason. But whatever. Let's see. After the dawn comes the rain. Technically it's the other way around, but I guess technically it could also be... Yeah, no, that works. In the wake of X of Swords, which hasn't been released as its own trade yet, they have a tendency to do that kind of stuff. It's one giant leap for mutant kind as Krakoa turns its attention to space and relaunches Sword. Yep. Back on Krakoa, Cyclops and his allies grapple with the ramifications of the recent ordeal, which should be odd considering I haven't read that yet, but okay, and the fateful decisions that were made, setting in motion the X-Men's next evolution. Meanwhile, the Resurrection protocols have been thrown into chaos. As the Five deal with the fallout, it's up to X-Factor to restore order. And as Sinister continues to scheme, the recently reborn Hellions face an urgent mission to retrieve Nanny's ship and build new armor for a revived and deadlier Orphan Maker. Alright. Collecting Sword #1 by Al Ewing, Jonathan Hickman, and Leah Williams. X-Men 16 by Zeb Wells, Valerio Schiti, and Phil Noto. Really hope I'm saying that name right. I feel like I'm not. Valerio, whatever. X Factor 5 by Dave Baldion and Steven Segovia, and Hellions 7 and 8 by Marta Gracie, Israel Silva, and David Curiel. The X-Men stuff has been interesting-ish. That new Sword series looks cool, so I'll be interested in that. Here we go. Some connections to that. King in Black. That series they've been talking about a lot. The new Venom-connected event. Let's see. Darkness Reigns. After a campaign of terror across the galaxy, Null reaches Earth, and he hasn't come alone. Pardon me. With an army of hundreds of thousands of symbiote dragons at his command, the King in Black is a force unlike any Earth's heroes have ever faced. Eddie Brock, aka Venom, has seen firsthand the chaos that even one of Null's monsters can wreak. Can anyone possibly survive this onslaught? Outgunned and outmanned, Earth heroes are reeling. It will take everything they've got to face the God of the Abyss as he ensnares the planet in everlasting darkness. Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman present the definitive chapter in their 3-year-long Venom saga that changed everything you thought you knew about symbiotes, and they're raising the stakes for the entire Marvel Universe. Hail to the King. This definitely looks like an interesting read. The Venom series has been pretty good, and Donny Cates is a good writer. Definitely one of my favorites in recent years, so this should be interesting. Not pick of the week, though. Pick of the week, we're going once again. Some weeks it hasn't worked out. Last week it did, so maybe it will again this week. Another Future State book. This time, what might be the biggest one yet. Future State, Superman. This looks like it's going to be an interesting twist. So let's see. The Family of Tomorrow and the World of Tomorrow. We all know the history of Superman and his family, but what lies ahead for them is just as exciting as what has come before. Peer across centuries as your favorite Kryptonians and their friends and enemies grow and change. Watch Jonathan Kent endeavor to establish himself as the true Superman, while his father Clark battles in the arenas of Warworld. Glimpse a far-flung era where Kara Zor-El, once Supergirl and now Superwoman, creates her own fortress of solitude on the moon. Cheer for Lois Lane as she tries to stop Lex Luthor from wrecking the United Planets. This collection also features stories starring some of Superman's most eclectic allies, spanning from Metropolis out into the farthest reaches of space. On Earth, the Guardian is trying to keep Superman's city from crumbling in the absence of its regular protector, while in space, the dangerous Midnighter undertakes a secret mission to give Clark a fighting chance. Plus Shiloh Norman, aka Mr. Miracle, bouncing between both worlds, looking for the link that connects them both, bouncing between both worlds, looking for a link that connects them both. That was a sentence with a period. Meet a brand new version of the Black Racer as she claws her way up from the depths of Warworld, and a transformed legion of superheroes trying to regain their powerful legacy. And to cap it off, fast forward to the distant millennium when Clark Kent's descendants protect the universe as the House of El. Collects Future State Superman of Metropolis 1 and 2. That's the one with Jonathan Kent. Future State Superman World of War 1 and 2. That's the one with Clark Kent. Future State Superman vs. Imperious Lex. Future State Kara Zor-El and Future State Kara Zor-El Superwoman. I'm sorry, there's a comma there that confused me. Future State Kara Zor-El Superwoman 1 and 2. Future State Legion of Superheroes 1 and 2, and Future State Superman House of El number 1. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of stuff. This is my pick of the week. I think this will be the most interesting one. But we'll see. Now, on to the question of the week. Still haven't gotten down how long I should wait, but I think that should be enough. Yeah, this one's a weird one because it's almost a purely opinion question. But of all the different comic book adaptations we got in various forms, and I had to break this down. I was almost just going to ask what the one pick in general, but then I realized I had to break this down into categories because there's so many different things. And it is, what's the best comic book adaptation to date? And we're talking, this is something that goes back, to the fucking 40s. To like fucking radio shows and shit. So, but, I don't expect people to pick that. But, like I said, I was thinking just one, but there's so many different things to choose from that I feel like I have to break this down into certain categories. So I think the categories are going to be, what's the best comic book adaptation in movies, live action television, animation, which could be movies or TV shows, we'll just say animation in general, and video games, because there's been a lot of those too. Then you have to ask yourself, well, what makes it the best adaptation? Is it just the one I like the best? Or is it the one that's most faithful to the source material? Or is it the one that balances the two things the best? Because yes, you want to be faithful to the source material, so the the characters in question feel familiar. You don't deviate too much. You don't change things too much, so it feels like a completely different thing. There's definitely examples of, some that have done that. Like, I think probably in movies, the best one to think of would be the movie Taken. It's so different from the comic book that it's pretty much a completely different thing. It's a decent It's a decent action movie, but it's so different from the comic book. It's not even remotely similar. There's a few similarities, but not enough to make it the same thing. But then again, if you tell a story too similar, if you just retell the story in movie form, well, it's like everybody who's coming to see it are people who read the comic book, and if they already know the story completely, you're gonna fucking bore the shit out of them. So, you need to deviate a little bit, just not too much. So it's a weird balancing act that makes a good adaptation. I think the main thing that makes a good adaptation really relies on the actors. Unless you're talking about video games. Though voice acting could be important in video games. So that's maybe more of a director's thing. It's different in video games and probably cartoons, though, like I said, the voice acting is important there. But in live action, the actors are really selling the great adaptation because they're adapting the characters. So they have to sell the idea of the character to you. And there's been a lot of great ones that have done that. So many to name. A lot of the Marvel ones have been really great, like Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man or Chris Evans as Captain America. The DC movies have had a lot of problems in recent years, but I think the actors they got to play the characters have nailed it. Like, Ben Affleck isn't my favorite Batman, but he was alright. I do like Henry Cavill as Superman, though. But yeah, it's hard to break down. So really, I think my favorite have always been the ones that toe the line the best. That they stay faithful to the source material, but are willing to tell their own stories and do their own things, but while keeping things familiar enough. So I think here's my choices. In terms of movies, I would have to go probably with Avengers Infinity War. Simply because it is the first and only movie that I have seen that has ever captured what a massive comic book crossover is like. Like, not just your Avengers or your X-Men or your Guardians of the Galaxy or any of that shit, but like one of those books that captures all those characters together in some big event where they're crossing everybody over. Not even like King in Black, like I talked about before, but like something even bigger than that. Like, like the comic book version of Infinity War, or the Infinity, or like whatever yearly major crossover they end up building to. That movie really captured what that felt like. And plus, they had all that build-up from the previous Avengers movies, and they established all the characters, and all the actors did their parts great. So yeah, Avengers Infinity War is the best movie in terms of that. In terms of TV show, this was a bit harder to determine, but I have to go with what I think is my favorite, and that's The Boys. Live-action TV show. I think they changed the story enough, but keep it similar enough, and I think all the actors nailed their roles. And, especially Anthony Starr as fucking Homelander. He's just fantastic. So, yeah, The Boys is definitely my choice for TV shows. In terms of cartoons, this one I had to think about a lot. But I just had to go back to one of the originals, at least for me. And that was Batman, the Animated Series. It's an oldie. And I know it probably gets talked about too much, put on maybe too high of a pedestal, but man, was that a killer cartoon that really sold Batman to an entire generation and led off to so many things. You got a Superman animated series, and then from that there was a Justice League cartoon, and they all started from that Batman cartoon. It all started with that. In terms of video games, keeping with Batman, I gotta go Batman Arkham City. You could say Arkham Asylum because it all started with him. It all started with that one, but Arkham City just ratcheted Arkham Asylum up so much. Arkham Asylum was fantastic, but Arkham City just took everything to a whole new level, and it's just the pinnacle of what those types of games could be. Even the new Spider-Man game tried to copy the way they did things and how they changed shit and tried to tell their own story, and it worked for them, but they were definitely just kind of copying the Arkham Asylum formula or Arkham City formula, the Arkham games formula to some degree. And I think there's supposed to be another Arkham game somewhere down the line, and I definitely look forward to it. So yeah, those are my choices. Avengers Infinity War for live action movie, The Boys for live action TV show, Batman the Animated Series for a cartoon, and Batman Arkham City for video games. Those are my 4 choices for the best adaptations in their respective categories. Maybe you have different choices, or maybe you completely agree with me. I'll leave that up to you. So yeah, those are my choices. And yeah. That's weekend reading for this week. I'm sorry I'm so tired and seem so out of it, but I didn't sleep well last night, and this job is kicking my ass. I'm really hoping I get a new one soon. Anywho, that's it for me this week. That's what I'm reading. What are you reading? Are you reading? Do you know how to read? You should learn. It's actually very useful. But yeah, that's it for me. Have a good one. Have a nice weekend, folks.